However, there is a gift in anger. It shows you what you're passionate about.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Enlio podcast. My name is Josh, and yes, we are on video. Every podcast we will have a video element so that we can beef up our YouTube content and give you more engagement. And this is our second time doing this, trying to look at you guys in the camera, in the audience, until we have our guests on today, and then all that other time will be spent looking at them. And we are so excited. It is 2023. We are back with a vengeance. Not quite. But I want to go ahead and get right into it. I am very happy to be once again with my lovely wife, Rebecca.
Hey guys. Oh my goodness, my voice is catching.
Oh no, it's not the thing coming back, is it?
I don't know. I've still got a weird like sickness thing going on, but yeah, I'm mostly good. So, yeah, I was pretty sick over Christmas. Which was not fun.
Yeah, gosh, I mean, like through our whole vacation, it was well, not the whole vacation. It was about a few days, but you like almost like lost your voice,
Oh, I
like
did. I
nearly.
couldn't speak. It was bad. It was
Yeah,
the like, yeah, it
and
was
yet you
awful.
still tried to sing. And I said, "Don't do it."
That was when I was getting better, okay? And it's a good song I want to sing. So, I can't help it.
Just to give you guys an update, we are still working obviously on our set design. I put a little bit of a bookshelf behind Becca just to give something until we paint the wall behind us and get some other decor in order. And you guys will enjoy this. Our logo. So we're branded. Yay.
Got something anyway.
Exactly. Today's episode um wasn't planned on starting 2023 like this, but it is going to be heavy. But we have a professional with us who is going to work with us through the short film that we'll be talking about. And so we are very proud and pleased to have life coach and also the owner of legitu.com, Lisa Michelle Zega.
Hello,
Welcome.
hello.
Hey, welcome so much, and thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you. I feel this compulsion to say Hallelujah.
We love it.
Yeah, it's great. And so, Lisa, what I guess I'll get right into the interview question, but I guess I'll ask the first question. And so, the first question that we have for you, well, first, just tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of what you do.
All right. Well, my name is Lisa Michelle Zega, and you already mentioned that I own Legit You. Well, I'm a life coach. I specialize in grief, and I come from the premise that grief is love. I feel like it's exemplified beautifully in the short that we'll be sharing today. And grief is in all of life, and thankfully love is in all of life, and I think it connects us. It's one thing that we all share.
That's
That's true.
wonderful, awesome, and I'm so glad that you said that grief is love, because a lot of times we don't associate with that, or at least in my personal life, whenever I dealt with grief, I haven't said, well, how is grief supposed to be happy, joyous, and how is grief love? It's supposed to be sad and somber and everything.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that we'll be getting into that so that you can explain to our audience and through this medium kind of how we get to that point. But Rebecca, I want you to take it away with our interview.
Yeah, I know. I'm really excited to get into um, to this topic of grief, which I know you're very passionate about. Because I'm also passionate about this topic, so it'll be a really fun discussion. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too.
Uh, yeah. So tell us a little bit about your background and how you grew up and what got you into this life coach stuff.
Yeah, that It's so fascinating because we think of grief as generally the loss of a loved one. And I know I'll just speak for myself. I had no idea that I could grieve something I never had or someone that I never had. So that takes me right into my background. I never met my biological father. And then I had multiple stepdads. I moved many, many times. I think I'd moved about 20 times by the time I was 13 years old. So a lot of change and transition even when you're moving to something good, right, has a loss with it. There is a pattern, a rhythm to our life that involves like a death and a rebirth and a death and a rebirth. And we often are just moving on to the next thing and have no appreciation to what we're carrying that we've lost, right? So a lot of unfinished lived in me. I didn't know that my loss of a father would characterize or like create a blueprint for my relationships to men, my relationship to myself. I didn't know how this would imprint my nervous system. So, and then I ended up becoming a follower of Jesus when I was 18 years old. And I had this very simplistic view. Old things are gone, new things have come, everything is peachy keen, happy smile, Jesus, yay. And I didn't know that I was living a very simplistic shell of a life. My imprint of my childhood kept reoccurring both in my marriage and in my parenting. Fast forward, I divorced after 23 years of marriage. And we were, the ministry couple. And I thought I was a pastor's wife. And homeschooling mom, lost a major sense of identity, my bearings with the Lord. Then I ended up getting engaged, lost my fiance to a motorcycle accident. And that I had already become a life coach, and maybe I can get into that path another time. But regardless, I had this sense that his death was part of my calling. And I had that early on because he was probably the biggest champion of who I am in the world and how he saw me. And then that opened me to a much bigger understanding of grief. So that's sort of a, and I will say too, when I got that divorce, my children stopped talking to me. And I had been not just homeschooling mom, but a very invested time, energy. Like this was an identity of, my motherhood. And I felt like I lost my mom card. I lost my Jesus card. I lost my wife card. And I'm looking in this, wallet with no cards. And it's like, I I don't I don't really know who I am in this world. And I feel like the Velveteen Rabbit, and I don't even know if I get the story right, but the Velveteen Rabbit is like the rabbit's new and then the rabbit's worn and used, but the rabbit's real.
Yeah.
I I feel more real in life than I've ever. Yeah.
Wow, that was a great explanation. Yeah, and so much has happened in your life, but we are so lucky to know that there's a purpose to it all, you know? There's a purpose to um, everything that God has for us and allows to happen in our lives. Not that He causes them, but that He allows them to happen, and it's always for our good and always for the good of the world and what He wants to do. So lucky, because you could have gotten really sucked down into despair. That's, I'm sure, one of the things that we'll probably talk about with our media thing today. But you had mentioned what started you into life coaching, and that's actually our next question. So feel free to go ahead and share.
Well, before I do, one thing you said, Becca, now it's not dawning on me what you actually said, but what occurred to me is when I was, oh, God and purpose. And when I was 21 years old, my sister died. And I worked for a Christian organization at the time. And that's relevant only because my first day back to work was a prayer meeting. Like it was an all day prayer conference thing. And it felt very contrived. And so I went out on my own, right? And I'm having this wrestle with God, like, you're the God who raises the dead, and Misty at that point had been dead for 4 days, which was relevant to my understanding of the story of Lazarus. And I'm like, you could call her forth. And something awakened in me, like I was having a dialogue with God. And it wasn't an external voice, but it was some sense of like, yeah, okay, I will. For you, I'm a raiser from the dead. And this is what you need to know. This is not for your good. This is not for the good of my people. This is not what love would do, but for you, my child. And it was so, and some of this is going to be exemplified in the film we're going to watch, but like, because we see these images that are inside and outside of us, and it was so like this large presence, and I was on my knees and I was weeping, and in that place I was experiencing so much love, so much being held. It didn't take away, like it wasn't an intellectual exercise, like there were words or something, but something much deeper was happening. And I was able to break open to the actual pain. The raiser from the dead was really like another version of, I don't want to experience this. I don't want to go through this pain. I just want my sister back. Whatever this is, that's not what I want. And in that, what I experienced, right? Like however that wrestling went down, it didn't take away the pain. It brought love into it. And as far as becoming a life coach, I've always felt this like call to be with people, but mostly I relied on my intellect. I really, I'm quite good with my words and this kind of stuff. And I would be quite enamored with the ways that I seem to impact people. And it's funny. It's for me to admit it and to see but I wasn't genuinely connecting what I was doing. And this also relates to grief. What I didn't know then is I just wanted external validation. And this felt like a way, like a gift that I had, and I could kind of prostitute myself out there like, hey, I'll give you this. Will you pay me with validation? And, but regardless, however it started, however, I was going through a lot in the marriage that I mentioned earlier. And had gone to therapy and so many different things. And we went to this one transformational training, and I could see something in particularly the female facilitator, something awakened in my spirit, a longing, a calling. And I was also desperate. Like I didn't know this, but what I thought is I wanted to be fixed. If I could just be not me, then I could have the marriage and the life and whatever. But that, I didn't even know life coaching was a thing. And I ended up hiring a coach. I ended up getting trained as a coach. And I'm so grateful for the pain that I experienced post becoming a coach, because I still had all the ego I mentioned earlier. And I'm not saying that my ego is like completely gone or anything like that, but the pain opened me to a different way to connect with people. And after the divorce, I ended up in homeless services. So I was working with people in very difficult situations. And I was in a very difficult situation, and it became a beautiful love fest is in my, like, and that was in 2015. And what's so beautiful is I didn't lose all the training and the lessons and all. It's like my allowing my pain opened that up in a whole different way, and I still got to harvest all that learning and everything. And then now I'm a coach and a practitioner that I trust, whereas before I was just someone try. I don't want to say just in the sense that like there was nothing good that came from my life, because there was and there is, and it's beautiful. And now having an experience of so much more aliveness and connection, I'm like, oh, now this is living. And that's one of the reasons I love grief, because I think it has that gift in it.
Yeah. Yeah, it reminds me of excuse me. It reminds me of a book called, oh my gosh. Oh, Voice of the Heart by Chip Dodd. And it's fabulous. We read it actually. Josh and I went to pre-engagement counseling,
Okay.
just to, make sure
Yeah.
everything was good, all that. And so when we read the book there, and it's really awesome because it talks about this idea of there being 8 main emotions that we all experience. And they seem at first glance pretty negative,
Okay.
like anger and what was another one? I think grief was one of them. And um lonely and things like that. And what was awesome though about it is like, okay, this is the emotion we experience, a flare up of anger. Okay, there's a, a negative reaction that can come out of that. If you stay in anger, you're going to go towards bitterness. That's the progression there. However, there is a gift in anger. It shows you what you're passionate about, and it
Kind of like the
highlights
what
that.
we kind of like do with like quote unquote righteous anger.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. It shows you what you're passionate about. And when you're lonely, it can drive you down into, I forget what the actual negative thing is, but it can drive you down to lonely or to um like
Isolation,
depression.
maybe.
Yeah, isolation, exactly. And then the gift of that would be connection. You can have true, genuine connection with someone when you say, like for me in particular, like saying to Josh, I feel really lonely right now. And he can
Mhm.
go, oh, I'm so sorry. Something was missing here. Let's connect. And so that beautiful thing can
Yeah,
happen.
and that communication is like played like largely into our narrative. Like,
Hmm.
I feel this because of this, and then we get to a resolution, and yeah, that's one of the most vital pieces that we've learned. Again, it was entered into with the pre-engagement counseling, and then has just carried on through marriage. So really good.
Yeah. So yeah, there's the point in all of that is there's a gift in grief, a gift in anger. All of the emotions that you have are indicators of something else that's going on deeper inside of you. And yeah, I love talking about emotions because there is a gift to it, It's not all bad and negative, particularly as Christians, we think, "Oh gosh, you're angry. Um that's a sin. Don't be angry." And it's like, "What? No. To be angry is not a sin. You just need to work through it. It can turn into a sin, but um
Well, and I
anyway,
think that's the thing. We are so much wanting to stay within the lines, particularly in religious settings, right? That becomes an added. So, Jesus is the incarnation and came to make us more human. And sometimes when we are trying to just follow religious order, we actually function as less human. I mean, God is the one who gifted us emotions. Emotions, like you already said, Becca, they're information. But when we are afraid of what they are communicating, or we think they're communicating something wrong or bad about us, like they are reinforcing something that's already imprinted within our nervous system, some fear, whatever, and we reject them. That's what I mean when I was saying that I lived more like the outline of a human than a human. That's what I meant when I was saying I feel like the Velveteen Rabbit, like when I looked all new and shiny, but I wasn't real. I was just trying to give myself, others, God, the version that I thought was acceptable, particularly acceptable in church. And that's why, like, the honesty about these things is not what's hurting us. It's the trying to keep it all to ourselves, and because we're afraid of what these things mean. And then that leads to, then we find out all the things that are being done in secret. But those sins are symptoms,
Mhm.
and they're cries for help.
Yes.
We're all really crying out for love and connection. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree. Um, it all comes down ultimately to that one simple thing, and I feel like so often on our podcast here we talk about identity, and it's because that's the root problem. If you want to boil it down to one singular root problem, we don't know our identity, and then everything else is just a symptom,
Right.
pretty much. Yeah.
And even that, it can become a trap, right? Well, my identity in Jesus. If my
Yes.
identity is in Jesus, I'm supposed to be this way. And rather than, like, I would even say, I've got this visual of, like, okay, there's a big circle and that orb is love, right? Now I don't even remember the visual that I came up with. I remember there was a triangle within it, and I had them all labeled. But the idea is, in order to get out of the triangle, whether it's our grief, I don't remember my thing, but love is at the edges of everything. That's what you want to remember. And we go through these experiences, and love will meet us. It's just we are afraid of the experience itself, so we stay imprisoned. And we don't know that I am made by love. I'm made for love. I exist in love. Love will always catch me. But I don't know that. And so I'm afraid to tell my husband what I really think. I'm afraid to, like, be my genuine self, because I'm afraid to share my disappointments. That means I don't love what I have. That means I'm ungrateful. We make up all these stories. And if we knew that like, the essence of us is love, because we are made in love, by love, in the image of love, for love. And love will literally catch all of it, but we create our own hell staying in these bounds, that because we think they're keeping us safe. And maybe at one time when we were little and didn't have any options, they were.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, so much goodness. So going back to our questions a little bit here.
Okay.
Um, so you've got a business and website called Legit You, which we talked about earlier. So tell us a little bit more about that. What's on the website? What do you do through that?
Yeah. So the website itself, Legit You, I was just like, man, maybe I should have just said Real You. But, and I don't even know if that was available, but it's the idea. There is a poem by Rumi, and the second line, I think, said, "The seawater begs the pearl to break down its walls." And I think that and it's in the short that we're sharing, but, like, grief is begging us to break down our walls to receive love. And so the website, the website's just a holding space or a contact space, but the point is that grief is love, and it's It's a normal part of life. And what I do through the website, or the offers that I have, are one-on-one guidance, group guidance. I lead grief rituals. And then there's a whole organizational side where I work with companies, not just in the realm of grief, also in the realm of poverty and being with one another in a human to human way. Like, and that also gives the framework for how I'm just with people. I'm not a therapist. I'm not coming in as the expert in another person's life. I am a with you, for you guide who has experienced much of what people experience, right? And I haven't experienced everything. I'm a with you guide in empathy, able to go with you where you are.
Nice.
Did I answer your question, Becca?
Yeah, yeah. It told us about what is Legit You, what's the website, what happens there. Yeah, it's nice to know, there's individual care, but also group. And it's interesting working with companies coming into so I'm guessing it's kind of like an employee assistance program that you're kind of assisting with.
Well, I mentioned that I worked in homeless services. And when
Mhm.
I did that, I ended up becoming our primary trainer. But first, I was just motivated. Like, I wanted to make sure that I was helping and not doing harm. And
Absolutely.
I was the director of employment. And I worked both with companies and then also with individuals. I was kind of like a liaison of sorts. And then in my own passion, and our CEO supported that, and then I was just learning to be with people effectively. So I've got all this training of how we work with individuals in our companies to be effective. And now that same CEO is with another foundation, and I get to be a trainer for multiple agencies and companies to help people come out of poverty. But the really big thing about that is reorienting our understanding of poverty. Like, it's around resource, not just financial, spiritual, mental, emotional, physical,
Yeah.
right? And then how are we with one another in a way that honors that everyone is bringing problem solving to the table, and every voice. And I know that your podcast focuses on Christians. Think
Mhm.
about this. Every individual is made in the image of God. Every single one. Every voice is essential. My own belief about our being created in the image of God, why are there the billions of people on the planet that there are, that it takes that many individuals to create a faint reflection of the glory and majesty and beauty of God. And so we want every brush stroke, every dot, every human honored. And when one human's hurting, we're all hurting, whether we recognize that or not. Every time we turn our faces away from someone else's suffering, we're turning away from our own, which is why I believe that turning toward our grief is actually a balm of healing for the whole world.
Yeah, it reminds me of what Jesus said, what you do to the least of these, you do to me. So
Right.
when we turn our backs on people who are in pain, we're essentially doing that to Jesus. We're turning our backs on him. And that just reminded me of what you were talking about there.
And that's the thing, one of the misnomers, like, we're so afraid of being selfish that we're like, I got to go out and serve. But oftentimes we can only serve from what we have, right? If I'm trying to bring you a plate of food, but my plate is empty, then I'm providing an empty plate. And so it's like we're coming within, like loving our neighbor as we love ourselves.
Got to
Well,
love yourself.
it's like
Yeah.
implied, and yet so many. I heard from the pulpit 2 Christmases ago, like, this idea of loving yourself being ridiculous, and I was sitting there going,
No.
That's kind of exemplifying what we got here. We're, and then we want to browbeat people for being selfish. It's like, I can only give from that which I've received. And
Mhm.
God is inviting me to receive love.
Mhm. Yeah, it reminds me of the story of the feeding the 5,000 multiple times, actually. But to Jesus didn't make something out of nothing. He had to receive the fish and the loaves in order to multiply. So what we have, God will multiply. Mhm.
That's, I'm just so excited, Becca, because I was describing. So someone asked me, all right, well, what do you mean when you say grief is love? And I was like, well, I don't know, everything breaks down, but imagine grief in a bowl. And that's so awesome. How do I think that we should look at the grief process? Well, our grief, like imagine it in a container, and it needs love. It needs love. That the temptation, and we'll see this in the short, is to hold it, to keep it, to, we feel judged by it. We feel like it means so much. We feel like a pointy finger from other people at us. And what it's really asking for is love. And when love gets poured into grief, it becomes more than the original love that's poured in. It multiplies like the loaves and the fishes, and something miraculous and transformative happens. And like we'll see in the short, it doesn't take away the tears, but what does it do? It brings the connection. It brings the joy of the memories. It brings there is a comfort within the suffering that we know that, yes, love is holding us. It's holding us all, and it's holding us together. And I just love that you brought up the multiplication, because that's really what I mean. And that's, Josh, I want to try to clarify, like, to open to the love process. I'm not trying to put something on people. Like, when we are in fresh grief, it can feel devastating. Like everything within us feels out of alignment, like our whole body's betraying us. I know when Chip died, I couldn't get my sleep in order. I couldn't bring my focus. Sometimes I would look at a piece of paper. I couldn't read the same way. Like a lot changes. So part of that is allowing what we need, allowing ourselves to sleep, asking someone over, not to fix anything, just to be with me, giving. Like, I ended up creating a ritual, and I didn't even recognize that's what I was doing. But I came home and I wrote to him every day after work. And at the time I was writing on Facebook. I don't know, it was part of my process. It was like this public out loud. And, that's part of Lisa. But it gave me a place that I knew I felt like I could go and meet with him every day. And
I
then,
mean,
yeah,
I can only imagine the loss of the spouse. I mean, we've never had to experience uh, that in particular um, loss, though we have both lost relatives and everything. Um, but yeah, like we were talking after we had to watch the short film last night, just so that it was fresh. That and this will go into our question a little bit later. But people, when they see somebody grieving, they automatically want to get them from the sad train to the happy train, and it's like, oh, it's okay, you'll get through this. You know, God has a purpose and all this, and we all know that's true, but that's not exactly what we need at that moment. We
not
need
at all.
listening more than talking, in
Right.
my opinion, at least.
I, Josh, when the result that no one intends, when you come and tell a person, like literally the day after Chip died, someone very important in my life and his looked at me and said, "You'll meet someone new."
Oh, true, but not what you need to hear.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
was like the most, like, and I was shocked. And I'm like, but what ends up happening when we offer these platitudes is the person grieving feels more alone and more like there's not someone to be with them in the pain. Like the most loving thing to do is just to be there. It is totally okay to say, I don't know what to say, and I'm here. I'm just here. Like the person suffering doesn't know what to say either. But here's the lie that's underneath that: there's nothing we could say to make it better. The lie is like, there's a magic formula and I can take it all away. We don't take it all away. And the other lie that's saying is, if I could take it all away, then you would be okay. Do you know I'm actually more okay holding the both and of my life? My dog died a few days before Christmas. So my house feels really, really empty. And I get to embrace the missing of Charlie. And my kids came home. My son just got married and they came home from their honeymoon. And so I had my new daughter-in-law and my son, and like we got to embrace the both and. When I go to the bathroom, it sounds silly, but it is lonely. Why? Because Charlie used to sit on my feet. And I get to, and by opening myself to feeling the pain of the loss of Charlie, do you know I actually was able to enjoy Faith and Augie more than if I was trying to keep my grief small. That also keeps my enjoyment of my life small. We're not either or people. We're both and people. We're stretched out, wide open, Jesus loving, death, resurrection people. And yet we try to, let me just give you the right little thing and I'll keep you in this tiny little box where you feel suffocated. That's not what we want for each other.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, we try to like what you said. We want to try to find a safe, excuse me, a safe space. For people that are grieving. It's like, okay, we got programs. Here's pamphlets. Here's a book. Here's a motivational tape. It's gonna get, and they try to make it this one fell, swoop. But it's not. It is called a process for a reason. It's not going to take a day. Not going to take 2 days, a week. It is however long that person needs to process their grief and their loss of whatever that might be.
And we grieve while doing life, like life doesn't.
Mhm.
I remember when my sister died, probably the most shocking part was no one, like the world didn't stop. People didn't stop eating dinner or going to parties, or like when someone close to you dies or you go through a divorce or there's something that feels like your entire life has changed, it's very like feels abrupt and unsettling that everything around you keeps going. And so it's creating the space within us, because like when Chip died, I had to work to provide for myself. I remember desperately wanting to go, like I had this idea of I wanted to go to like a Quaker community, and I wanted a slow life, and maybe I could have done those things, but what I told myself was that I couldn't, because I had a car payment and like and I had a job. Like I just didn't know how to provide for myself and do that. And one of the beautiful things is that we can create rhythms for grief within the course of a life.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that that kind of goes into a question, the last question we had, which we talked briefly about earlier, and that is, what do you think the church gets wrong about grief? Like I said, we mentioned that earlier, but um, yeah, I just want to hear from you.
I think I think the church gets wrong about grief that it's something to be solved and resolved. I think the church gets wrong that there's a formula, there's a Bible verse, there's a quick fix, we don't resolve love. We don't try to solve for it. We don't come at love like a math problem. But sometimes we do because in the church, like anytime we try to put a formula around something, and in the church, we put that formula under the guise of, well, this is the truth. And if that truth disconnects us from our heartbeat, from our emotion, and basically puts us performing for ourselves and others, God's not interested, in my opinion, in a performance. God's interested in a relationship. And in our trying to do things right, trying to do things scriptural, trying to do things according to the book, we often live isolated, and we live one way out there, one way in our homes. And I've seen this in my own life, in lives of so many people. And then we see it on the news, about church leaders who, great things, scandals come out about. But it's like every time we're taking one step away from being real, more and more hiding's happening in the back. And there was something else. Like I remember a friend of mine, who actually was also a client of mine. My friends are my clients. My clients are my friends. And if you're not, that's how we become. But she had gone through a divorce, and it was devastating, and it was dark, and the amount of grief that brought up. And I remember she was crying at church, and the leaders told her it had been long enough, and it was distracting for other people. And because she had had a role in leadership, like again, it's like this idea of, it's very subtle of how we're telling people to perform. Her tears were the most genuine aspect, and what she's told is that makes the people around you uncomfortable, so please keep it inside.
I that's just the audacity.
It's
Yeah,
heartbreaking.
it is heartbreaking. It's when you get into a church and a religious setting that is like, okay, we do this here. You can't, um, be this way within this congregation. Rebecca, we went to a church, um, in I think Franklin, and it was during a service, and somebody started speaking in tongues,
Oh, yes. I
and the
remember this.
pastor, I guess maybe he was called off guard or something, but he says, could somebody help that woman in the back?
Basically tell her to be quiet.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
In the name of order.
yeah,
Right.
and then also, there was like another story when somebody's like, grieving, like, they prayed, for their relative to be healed of cancer, and prayed, and they end up dying. And somebody, a little bit time after the death of that relative, told that person, well, I mean, if you would have prayed harder, maybe it would still
Right.
I
be
knew
here.
that was where you were going, and I'm
Yeah,
like, "Oh."
Or if you
I
had enough
know.
faith. I'm
Yeah,
sure you've heard that one. Yeah. And
yeah.
it's like, that is not what we need to be telling people. And
Mm-mm.
it creates so
And
much shame.
I feel anger. I feel anger inside my body right now. And I also have this sense of the people saying that are also they're not able to give the love the person needs because they are not able to receive the love that they need. Like, I really think these are indicative of, okay, I'm in my tight little box of trying to be who I think I'm supposed to be and so now I'm trying to control you so you'll be who you're supposed to be. And I really believe what's needed for all of us. Like, grief is always an invitation to love. We do not, we are afraid, and grief can feel incredibly scary, just like any other powerful emotion can feel utterly scary. And we're like, I'll be swallowed up by, we make up that I will be swallowed, devoured, and I won't have the life I desire. And trying to keep it all together is actually what ends up swallowing us up. It ends up becoming the cage, the prison, where we feel like we're genuinely suffocating. And it comes out in our bodies in all kinds of ailments.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, man, all kind of body ailments can like just surface all of a sudden.
And
You're
they're
like, gosh,
talking
why
to
do I have
us
this back
too.
pain?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because you're carrying shit that's not yours to carry. How about that?
Yeah. Exactly.
We don't know.
Exactly.
Well, Lisa, that's great. That really gives us a look into kind of like what you do, the whole grieving process, how we should view grieving, and that is a perfect segue into the short film that we'll be talking about. So, Lisa, you actually suggested this. We went through a few ideas before we landed on this one, and I'm so glad that we did. And so, tell us the title of what we're going to be discussing today.
If anything happens, I love you. And it's on Netflix.
Yes, and this has been on Netflix for maybe a couple of years because I've passed through it a few times in the past and was meaning to watch it and just never got around to it. But I'm so glad that I did. This short film says so much in 12 minutes. It
Yeah.
is amazing.
With no dialogue.
Yes.
Yeah.
I am so curious. And Josh, shut me down if I'm not allowed to do this, but I'd like to be the interviewer and say, Becca, Josh, tell me about your experience of this short. Like,
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is discussion, so we're here for it. I will say, if you don't mind me saying so, Becca, this hit her in like such a different way than like any other like short that we've watched or movie that we've watched, you know, um, for, recently. And there are sad moments, but then there is like you're like sobbing and like you're really connecting, and you know, so that's she felt it more than I did. Um, but it's still relatable in that sense. So, Lisa, as you said, this is titled "If Anything Happens, I Love You." It is on Netflix, and 12 minutes. We'd recommend you all go ahead and check it out.
But make sure you've got a tissue box
Yes,
nearby. I mean,
exactly.
really.
And I, as we said, this has no dialogue. It's all done through animation, motion, and music, which is the most powerful element in this whole film. So when getting into the animation side of it, it's very like originally hand drawn, a little bit of the like stop motion, kind of like just click, 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 going to the next motion. But what goes through and kind of like pushes it along is just the music, kind of like starts off a little bit somber. We get into the memories, a little bit happy upbeat pop song plays, and then straight away, like almost abruptly, it goes back into the somber, the sadness. So let's kind of like maybe walk through this um, film a little bit. So, Lisa, why did you suggest this short for us to talk about?
Well, I feel like I was divinely led to it. I kid you not. I mean, you and I, Josh, had talked about because grief shows up in everything. I really, shy of maybe some of the Sunday morning kid cartoon kind of things or Saturday morning, whatever it is. But even then, no, because there's always like a dilemma, a loss, whatever. But I wanted I just was fooling around on my couch one day and I said, God, I'd really dig it if you would just give me an animation. And the next thing I know, I saw that, I watched it, and I'm like, what? Like, it's like I asked, God does it, and then I'm like shocked. But and it says, there's a song, a country song, you say it best when you say nothing at all. So that's coming to my mind with this not having words. There is so much said in this short. And I think I was telling you all that I've watched it, I don't know, maybe 20 times now. And every time I see a new facet, it's become like I've been doing Lectio Divina as far as the way that I'm reading scripture and this meditative approach. And that's how I've been watching this short. So that's why I'm like so eager to hear what came for you all. But that's why I suggested it, because it was given to me and it exemplifies. I think it literally shows what I'm trying to say when I say grief is love.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Everything that you were talking about earlier, it is shown so beautifully in the short. Yeah, absolutely. And it was so powerful.
Yeah.
So Josh told me nothing, by the way,
And
about
it,
this
and it was good
short.
that you went into it blind, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, he was like, "Okay, we got to watch this short film for the podcast," and I was like, "Okay, cool." So he had turned it on, and then there was the only thing I saw was in the like top left-hand corner where it said something about gun violence and grief or something, and I was like, "Ooh, okay, interesting. What are we getting into here?" And so I kept waiting for like the shoe to drop, so to speak, and um man, it went in a direction that I didn't think it was going. I was like, okay, all I knew is someone was going to get shot in this. And so you see there's two people sitting at a dining table. They're obviously very sad, not wanting to talk to each other. And then there's these like shadow figures that come up from them, and you can see the shadows arguing, and then they end up just not talking to each other. And then you see them individually. It's a man and a woman, and they connect, or they see something that sparks something, and then the little shadows trying to lift them up, encourage them, make them smile or some in some way. And then as you continue to go on through the story, you realize, oh, they actually have a daughter, and she ultimately, as you go through the story, she starts going to school, and then those shadow figures come up, and they're trying desperately to keep the daughter from going to going to school. And it was in that moment that I realized, oh, this is a school shooting.
Yeah, gosh. I I didn't know where it was. I know that she was like heading to school. I didn't know she was gonna get, hit by a car or something's gonna happen along the way. But as soon as I saw she went to school and in Thor, like you hear that pop of the gun, I mean, you know it was gonna happen. And we've seen this, in other situations, Columbine, Sandy Hook. Um, it is just devastating. Like, murder is one thing when you hear it's like, oh, man 35 was murdered, woman 50 something years was murdered. But something hits differently like when it's kids. And Beck and I were talking about um last night as well, where there's just all these emotions that you always think about, kids bearing the parents, but parents shouldn't have to bear the kids. And it's so heartbreaking when that happens.
Yeah, it reminded me of that scene in Lord of the Rings where Lord Theoden had to bury his son, and there are all the little flowers that grew over the tomb. And he said much the same thing of parents should never have to bury their children. And I think it was most emotional for me for a couple of reasons. But as we were going through the story, I kept thinking about so Josh and I are trying to have kids right now, and we've had a lot of trouble with that. And we're having to go through all the fertility treatment and everything. We're kind of at the I don't know, I'd say we're in the middle of our journey here, and it's hard. And I just know how much we want a child. And I've had to go through, I mean, both of us have had to go through our own grieving processes of it hasn't happened yet. And um, so that's a lot. So I know how much we are striving for that, how much money we're pouring into this time, effort, all of these things. And what if we were those parents and we finally had this beautiful, perfect little girl, and then we sent her off to school, and there's this senseless, horrible shooting at school, and we lose her. All of this effort and time and love, and then she's just gone. And it, that really hurt me. That was really like, oh my gosh. And I was talking to Josh last night, is obviously we don't know yet that full parental love, but even from everything that we're going through, we can kind of get like a taste of it. And so it was just like what these parents actually go through in these school shootings is just unbearable, truly. And yeah.
Yeah, that is when I'm talking about grief being love, it's it's like you're open to the fullness of the pain. It doesn't actually, like, we're not talking about numbing something. We're talking about the kind of grief that breaks you open in ways that you don't even know you can be broken open. It doesn't mean, like, literally this week, friends of ours are going to be burying a toddler who was killed by a redwood crashing on their house in a storm. And this friend posted about the vulnerability that grief, like, it literally, the temptation is to get so rigid and locked and pull in, but to open to the fullness of the love that they have for that grandson. And or the, like we see in the short, for them to open to all the memories and like gathering her up and loving all the parts, and seeing the mark on the wall from the soccer ball, and seeing the plants planted, and and enjoying the kitty cat and all the things, also means opening to the loss that she's not here. And it's not trying to close off, like you said earlier, Becca, the emotions. Like, yes, there's, trying to imagine, which I can't really imagine a school shooting in terms
Yeah.
of being the intimate one. Happened in our area just a couple of years ago. But in terms of me being the parent, me being, or even the parent of, this is something to disenfranchised grief. Being the parent of the shooter who also dies, like,
Yeah.
this isn't exemplified in our short, but we've seen that multiple times. And then the parent doesn't feel like they have a right to grieve because society's not recognizing their loss. Well, that's not the only kind of disenfranchised grief. Suicide becomes that for, often for people, drug overdoses, but anything that doesn't, all grief gets dismissed in some ways in our society. People are told you can talk to any griever and you will hear stories of like, it's been 2 weeks, it's been a month, and time to move on. But you add to that the layers of not having that, like people come around and support those who've lost children. They don't tend to come around and support those who've lost children who are the perpetrator. And there's just a lot of, all of our grief needs love.
Oh yeah, because that parent of the perpetrator is still, they lost a child too, and it's not the parent's fault, and that's what people tend to like
We tend
put
to
the
want to
fault of
blame.
the child on the parents. Yeah, and
We all
that's
do
not
that, trying to
fair.
minimize our pain. That's all we're trying to
Yeah,
do. We're just doing
yeah,
pain management in ways that hurt us all.
yeah, exactly.
And my real point, I kind of ended up on a tangent that I was not intending as far as disenfranchised grief and things like that. But the point being is that I'm not offering grief is love as a way to minimize the loss we experience. It's mysterious because we open to greater pain, and then we open, which opens us to a love that is above and beyond what we could ask or think. And something from that, like a new life emerges that doesn't take away the loss, it just builds a bigger life around the loss. And we see it happen in the opposite way too. I mean, we do see parents that lose a child and then are not able to love the children that are remaining. Like do you know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
that wrestle between, there is a prison for us and a freedom for us. But what I am not trying to say, I just want to be careful in the sense that it doesn't sound like a bony finger telling someone that they're doing it wrong.
Mm.
I'm simply offering that those places of you that are desperately hurting, whatever you're hurting from, that those places are an invitation for love. And I really think that that's what that short, if I were to say, what did I really take away from it? That the places we're tempted to pull away and be alone are the places that are inviting love from us, like we're partnering with God in loving ourselves and in connecting with others to receive love. And
Absolutely. And that's one of our points that we have is grief is not only love, but grief is also unifying, because it brings together a community. And that Rebecca, you were talking, we had a guest on last year in May during our mental health series where they live in Israel. And in Israel, if somebody is, grieving, they go to them, they can talk if they want, but it's mainly just sitting with them listening, and it's this whole community that just gathers around, and that I think is just speaks volumes in helping those with the grieving process, not offering words of encouragement, not offering a 1 10 step whatever motivation, but just being there, being present. And you don't have to talk about the loss. You can talk about something else.
and
Yeah, it's just the idea of being together, that the idea of community and the love that you're talking about, Lisa. Um, I think that's where it comes out so beautifully.
And it reigns also to speaking scripturally, Romans 12:15, where it says, rejoice with those who rejoice, weep with those who weep. And again, just reiterating that sense of community and that unification that happens.
Yeah. And then it's okay to weep.
Yes,
Validation, you
it
know?
feels
Yeah,
good. It actually,
Jesus wept. He did.
That's right.
and the Josh, you said you don't have to talk about the loss. Often people that have, we're the ones afraid to talk about the loss. You know, when we're coming around someone who's grieving, often the griever wants to talk about the loss. Not always, but it's not so much the loss. They want to talk about the person. And we think if we talk about the person or bring them up, it's going to magnify. It actually oftentimes helps the person feel more connected, like, "Oh, I'm still allowed to be with this, beautiful human." Like, I am married, and my husband, particularly on anniversary dates, he will let me sit and tell him Chip's stories. We will do things like Chip was a huge, it just so happens my current husband also loves pepperoni and pineapple pizza. For all you pineapple haters, I'm just saying it's the way to go. But and we'll get a pepperoni and pineapple pizza, and we'll get a beer, and he'll listen to Chip's stories, and it becomes a deeper intimacy, like the way that my husband allows and makes space for us to come together in these ways. I feel more like our love for one another grows. It's, yeah.
Yeah, to have someone who allows that time for stories is just so amazing that they're not threatened by those stories. What a beautiful relationship you guys sounds like you guys
It's
have.
He's a beautiful, beautiful man. But both men are beautiful men, and I am so, so, so grateful for my current hubby.
That's wonderful. Getting back to the film a little bit, let's talk about the upbeat, the happy that we get in this short film, and that's where the pop song starts to play. Cat knocks the record player; it starts to go in. That's where the husband and wife enter into the room where their daughter used to reside, and start thinking about the car trips that they took. The blue paint spot on the side of the house. How did that happen? And how she got into soccer, and I believe it it gives that sense of rejoicing in those memories, um, in that part of healing, because yes, we're sad about the loss, but we built up so many memories with this person, however long they were with us, and it's important to remember that, but also not disregarding the loss that's also happened. But I think it's a very important part, when anybody's going through that.
Well, I want to bring up in the short, because that is the transition, and I want to, so the happy enters in allowing the sad. When the film opens, both parents are isolated, and the shadow figures, you'll notice that it's like you can see a shadow figure in each of their heads, and then an overarching shadow figure, and they are pointing and they are yelling. And what I make up about that, I'd have to talk to those who create it, is the accusation they feel from the other person, and they withdraw further and further inward. You see different things inviting memories, and the shadow person's actually trying to help them open to the experience, and they are staying closed, isolated, and alone. When the opening that you referred to happens, the mom pulls out the daughter's shirt from the laundry. You'll notice that it's blue. There's an invitation there. There's an invitation of color, of opening to the fullness of what she's experiencing. And it's in that opening where love gets in, and they are able to experience joyful memories of this precious, precious daughter. But the temptation is to stay closed. And you'll see in our own grief There is a continual knocking to open to what our genuine, real experience is. And it's counterintuitive. It's opening to it, the sad that even makes room for the happy. The closing to the sad does not give an entrance for the happy. And if you start to watch that in your own lives, or just noticing it in films or noticing it in one another, it's so mysterious that to open the very door that I'm like, no, that door is dark and hardened. I don't want to open that door. And that is the door that opens us to the very desires of our hearts. Death to life. No, I don't want the death. What did Jesus do? He willingly, right? For the joy
Right.
before him, endures the cross. And like that, I don't know of any other greater picture that shows that to open to everything I would ever want in life is also opening to the very thing I am. And Jesus was no different. If there is any other way, I want the other way. If there's any other way, that's what I want. The difference is Jesus willfully walks in. Like me, I'm just thinking of my sister. Even after the fact, if there's any other way, raise her from the dead. Okay, there's no other way. Not to have life and love and okay, this is my life. And there's a surrender. And what I'm surrendering to is not just the pain. I'm actually surrendering to the joy, the love, the happiness I desire in a life open, full. And I'm not even trying to make sense of any of the suffering. I'm just saying, I'm not trying to analyze or intellectualize it. I'm just saying experientially, that's the way.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point about the short that you brought up of the table scene in the very beginning. I wasn't quite sure what that was trying to say, but we make a really good point that it's more about what that other person thinks that they will say. So the husband is like thinking that the wife is accusing them, and the wife is thinking that the husband's going to accuse her of being wrong or whatever, and so they stay away. And that's the lie, that it's better to be away from each other. And yeah, I hadn't, I didn't quite connect those dots until you said that just a moment ago.
And get into kind of the whole like music score of the short film, because that is a very big part of it. It just still amazes me like how powerful that medium is in telling the story. This does a great job of showing instead of telling. There again, there's no dialogue, it's just motion, music, and that's great. Um, it definitely sets the tone for what you're about to watch. You don't know what it's fully about, but you have some expectations, unless you're Rebecca and you go into it blind.
Well, I had some sort of expectation that it was going to have something to do with the shooting. Someone was going to die, but I didn't know exactly what.
Absolutely. Well, with this movie, there's sorry, with this short film, there's a few like we try to relate to like scriptural references. Again, I mentioned Romans 12:15. There's different ones that you can pull up about grief and comforting. Just to list a few. Again, there's John 16:22, Romans 8:18, Joshua 1:9, Matthew 5:4. Just so many things um, that you can relate this to. But Lisa, I want to get your perspective on this. because we've mentioned that yes, we want to try to comfort, but we don't. We want to be there to listen more. Do you believe bringing scripture into that healing process? Do you believe that is vital, or is it just an add-on?
I say no. I say don't bring it in, especially in our culture right now. People already know the word. Um, and what it comes across as is like a something you're painting on, like it's like the room is devastated and I'm trying to just cover it with plastering over these words that mean nothing. The I am not saying God's word means nothing. What I am saying is that when your home is in rubble, you're not bringing you're coming and acknowledging the rubble. We want to go too quickly. We're like, this is scary. I got to get to the good stuff. Be in the scary. Allow it, because otherwise I'm just going to jump right to the very end of the film. It's my very, very favorite part, right? You see the parents, you see them alone and isolated. You see the little girl. This is her shadow image. I'm going to say it's like her essence, her spirit, and like longing to reach the shell of suffering in her mom and dad. And all of a sudden these big giant arms come out, and what I made up in my mind is the grief is so big, it's so large, it's so profound, and then it lifts as though it's lifting the world and folding it in half, and the grief has lifted mom and dad's world and broken it in half. And what does that do? It slides them together. And right there, I would say, God so loved the world. Like there is a breaking that happens and a coming together. Trust that process. Trust that love is big enough. We don't need to try to make love do its thing. God is love. Go be love. Francis of Assisi, go preach the word. Use words if you have to. That's how I would answer your question, Josh. Just go be the word.
Yeah, and I think that's really vital in
Certainly,
the
yeah.
beginning processes of grief, like right when it happens. A couple weeks after, you just need to be, just be,
Just
and then bring the word in.
yeah.
And it's like at that point, let it continue. Because I know I watched my mom grieve for the loss of her marriage and how she processed everything. And I remember the first couple of weeks, she just was, all of us were um, in the emotion, in the moment. And it was so hard to watch her go through that, and also experiencing my own grief and seeing my sisters grieve. And it was one of the most defining moments of my life, was going through all of that. And I remember talking with her later, though, much later, as she was continuing down her process of grief. She wrestled a lot with the story of David. And because the divorce was ultimately the result of an affair. And so she was looking at David's life going, how can David be called a man after God's own heart when he did this? Knowing my grief, God, how can you still say that? So she wrestled with that and ultimately came to peace and understanding through it. But she used scripture to help in that process. But it was later in the process. It wasn't, she wasn't studying that, a week after everything happened. So,
Well, even if she
yeah.
was, Becca, the key difference is she was doing it. She was
Oh, yes, I
wrestling with,
see.
right? So I'm the person, we're going to naturally do what we do. That might, all the wrestling with God, it might totally involve scripture. I'm not telling the griever what to do. I'm saying us as the support,
Got it.
we don't need to bring that. What is in them lives in them. And they will begin labeling and naming and sorting things out because we're meaning makers. That's what we do. We don't have to. What we get to model for others is it's okay to just be. Because even the griever often doesn't know how to just be.
That's true.
So we're just coming as love incarnate. That's what I think a safe place looks like. It just meaning that we're able to come and be in it with you. I'm going to enter in. Another great animated short, the Brene Brown, The Difference Between Compassion and Empathy, Josh, highly recommend it.
I haven't seen that one. I didn't know.
Oh
I love
my
Brene
gosh,
Brown.
2 minutes, you guys. I don't remember the exact title, but it's Brene Brown. It's an
Okay.
animation, and she's distinguishing not empathy and compassion, empathy and sympathy. Phenomenal. Oh, recommend it to everybody.
We'll check that out for
Yeah,
sure. That sounds
absolutely.
interesting.
Well, we had so much enjoyed talking about the short film, getting to know you better. Again, you've given like us and like our audience such a wealth of knowledge and just understanding about grief and what it is, how we should view it, and everything. So we really, really thank you and really appreciate that. Um, so we know you have your website, legitu.com, and if people want to follow you or kind of get them to know what you're doing, how can they follow you?
I'm on Instagram at lisamichelle.legitu. I'm on Facebook. I have a Facebook group that I do a lot in called Legit You. And for people that want just a place where someone, not to be advised, fixed, saved, just to be in community, I create communities that are like grief rituals and do that for 10 weeks at a time. And actually, I have one coming really quick, but that is a wonderful way to just be in community and see ourselves in the other. And it ends up opening more compassion for ourselves as well. So, did I answer that question, Josh?
Oh yeah,
Easy peasy to find me.
absolutely. And for those of you listening on the audio version of the podcast, again, if you want to hear the full interview or full discussion, head on over to our YouTube channel and you can view the full interview, full discussion. It is that's where you're gonna get the I was going to say the fullness of God, because you'll get the fullness of the podcast.
Hallelujah.
Exactly. Well, we thank all of you for listening, for watching, and until next time, keep those halos shining and stay holy, my friends.